Brandon, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I just want to make sure you can hear me all right. Everything sounding okay?
I hear you loud and clear.
All right, good stuff. Well, I'm glad you guys had me. I'm so happy that you listed HBAR. It's a good place to be going forward. But just to give everybody a heads up, they have a heck of a setup here. We are streaming on Riverside as well. So they're recording some video, and then we've got the Twitter Spaces going at the same time. So good stuff.
Powered on Metallicus. But also joining us today, gentlemen, ladies, we have Marshall Hayner also on our Twitter Spaces today. How you doing, Marshall?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me back, Eric. And it's a pleasure to be here with you, Brandon. Cheers.
Good stuff. Good to meet you.
Likewise. Yeah, it's great. Fellow, as I always say, great minds think alike. So it's natural for us to converge.
There we go.
This is where worlds collide, ladies and gentlemen. Now, Brandon, in the spirit of an AMA, and now that I can ask you anything, how did the HBAR Foundation start?
All right, so there's a few different entities within the Hedera ecosystem. I'm going to actually start with Hedera, if you don't mind. So initially, there's Dr. Lehman Baird. He's the inventor of the hash graph algorithm that underpins Hedera. And he worked on this math problem on, computers come into consensus in a really fair and fast way. He worked on that for years. And he would pick up that math problem. He'd work on it for a while. He'd figure that it couldn't be done, and then he'd come back to it. And eventually, he solved that problem, and that was the hash graph consensus algorithm. And we'll say, I'm not exactly sure, but we'll say that was in 2014 or 2015. And then they were trying to find ways to implement that privately and allow enterprises and corporations to use that in a private implementation. Well, there were some people that got a hold of him and the other co-founder of Hedera, Mance Harmon, and they said, you need to have this be a public network. There was success around that time with Ethereum, with Bitcoin, and so forth. This should be a public network. So they eventually, I think the plans were going on for that in 2017. The white paper I read the white paper for Hashgraph in 2017, and I was like, if they ever it wasn't announced at this point, the public network. I said, if they ever have a public network on this, I absolutely want to be involved. And a few short months later, in I think March of 2018, they announced that they were going to build the Hedera network, which was going to be underpinned by that hash graph algorithm. And by the end, I think September of 2019, it came to fruition in a public network where anybody was able to use it. So that's the quick background there. The HBAR Foundation in particular was granted 5 billion HBAR, so that's 10% of the total supply, and they were tasked with building out the ecosystem. And they came to fruition in the end of 2021. So they haven't been around all that long, but the ecosystem has grown really fast since that point.
My microphone was muted.
It happens. It's okay. I'm there all the time.
Gotta love how technology. So Marshall, after hearing all of that, what are your thoughts? Especially now that we have a strong listing with HBAR Foundation.
Yeah, I think, what HBAR Foundation and Hedera is doing is really interesting because, I was reading some messages earlier before I came to the spaces today, and somebody said, it's really funny. There's kind of two factions forming in crypto. You have the people that are taking it seriously, the people that are building foundations and public networks that can really evolve the internet. And then you kind of have like the gambling Pepe crowd or whatever, right? You have like the kind of the YOLO crowd, whatever. And then I think there's definitely somewhere in the middle too, right? Where there's, we're having fun, but we're also taking things seriously. But I really love what Hedera has done because they brought together all of these large companies to solve this problem, becoming more efficient, moving between public networks. It's not just transactional payments, but there's so many different applications that something like Hedera can be used for. And I think that it was one of the first early blockchain projects to really highlight large companies coming together and in a foundation. It really kind of, I think, was an impetus for Facebook when they tried to do DM, if I'm not mistaken, just a copy paste. And obviously that didn't work out because, I think in the end, not only is compliance and the regulatory aspect a big part of it, and you can't just kind of yeet that into the future and say, oh, we'll just figure it out. We're Facebook. We'll just open a WeWork office in Switzerland and that should suffice or whatever. You actually have to really have a vision and have leadership that has a vision to bring something like this to fruition. So I think, it's cool hearing it from an insider, from Brandon, seeing this thing and then saying, wow, if it ever became a public network, that could be really big. It reminds me a lot of, when I first discovered BitTorrent 20 years ago, over 20 years ago, when I was a college student, I was like, wow, that could be really big. That could really, this whole decentralized internet thing could become really big. And, when I discovered Bitcoin in 2009, same thing. I was like, oh my God, that's the BitTorrent of money. That's the decentralized web of money. And flash forward another, approaching 2 decades, look at how much has evolved. I think it's cool to hear the story because not everybody knows that it didn't start that way. And, to see something like this come together, again, just to bring it all back to where I started, there's definitely a growing faction, right? You have everybody in cryptocurrency would like to make money. It is a space where you have that going on. But at the same time, that joke, I'm in it for the tech, that is not just a joke. That's real. And you see people who have been here for 5-10 years plus, and that is really true. And so what Hedera is doing by bringing these large corporations together and solving this problem of a cohesive network, I think it's incredible. And I said this the other day on the other spaces. I don't think it's a one chain vision in the future of crypto. I think you have a lot of different blockchains solving different problems coming together. And Hedera is a big part of that regulated compliance blockchain puzzle. And I think that really is the future of crypto. Of course, you're going to have meme coins. You're going to have, chasing all of these things, but those are just little trends and fads that will kind of come and go and fade. The real value long-term is the utility. Sorry for the long rant, but it just wanted to paint that picture of, where we are now, where we'll be in 2033.
No, couldn't have said it better myself. Well said, Marshall.
Hey, there's no need to apologize for having the long answers. Everybody loves to hear you all talk. You know that, right? That's why everybody's at the edge of their seats listening to you guys, having these brilliant minds, like you said, think alike, So now, in terms of Hedera, I'm sorry, stupid. No, that's just HBAR. I'm sorry, man.
Hey, it's all the same. I know those could be confusing, Hashgraph and Hedera and HBAR. Too many H's going on.
So what are the exciting things that are on the horizon for HBAR?
Yeah, so there is a thriving ecosystem within the Hedera ecosystem. Just to frame exactly what we're talking about, Hedera is the public network. Hashgraph is the underpinning algorithm that it's built on, and HBAR is the native cryptocurrency for that network. There is a lot of exciting stuff going on across the board. As I said, the HBAR Foundation focuses on building out the ecosystem, and that comes to DeFi. We have a thriving gaming ecosystem. There's a lot going on in the supply chain tracking space, and I really want to get into Avery Dennison and Atmio and some of the stuff that they're doing. But also in TradFi, we have one of the first traditional exchanges to be built and leveraging a DLT called Digital Commodities Exchange is built on us. One of our council members is, I'm sorry, what was it? Aberdeen. And they have about $500 billion worth of assets under management. They're going to start tokenizing their funds on Hedera this year, and they plan to tokenize all their funds on Hedera. And we heard Larry Fink from BlackRock, another TradFi stalwart. He said that the future of securities and financial markets is going to be tokenization on public networks. So they know this is coming, and they're going to look to things like Digital Commodities Exchange, and they're going to look at things like Aberdeen on how to do it. But just going back to the supply chain tracking, because it's something over the past few months that's really proven out what Hedera is capable of. So Avery Dennison is they do like RAFD tags. So they're naturally part of the supply chain tracking world. And they spun up something called Atma.io. And what Atma.io does is it tracks these items through their supply chains. And it also right now is mainly being used for tracking the carbon usage of that supply chain. Right now, they're processing about 1,000 transactions per second on the Hedera network. So with that one use case, we're processing more than all of the other DLTs combined, almost ballpark in there, give or take. And Hedera's just humming along with time to finality right now at about 4.5 seconds. So it's not affecting the network at all. Essentially, as Rob Allen, one of the very famous people that in our space says, it's not breaking a sweat. So it's really proven out how we can apply a real world value add use case outside of speculation, outside of the normal crypto realm, and again, handle it without breaking a sweat. And I can, like Marshall, I can ramble on. So you just point me in a direction, you ask me the questions, and we'll go down the rabbit hole.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So how does HBAR address the issue of scalability?
Sure. So it's highly efficient on its own at the native layer. It can handle, right now, it's throttled down to 10,000 transactions per second. It mainly comes down to that consensus algorithm and what it can handle. It's very low load going through, but so it can handle 10,000 transactions per second. If we lifted that throttle, we could handle many tens of thousands of transactions per second just on a single shard. But it's already designed to be sharded. So that's breaking the network into pieces that can communicate in between one another and pretty much act like one network, even though it's broken up. And we could have as many shards as we want. So we could essentially have unlimited scalability with the Hedera network.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, when we talk about, right now, I've seen peaks with Atma.io and the rest of the network up around 7,700 transactions per second. That's really just going to be a blip. I think in the long term, we have plenty of other really large use cases that we plan on bringing online. The new coupon standard in the United States is being put out by somebody called, or an entity called the Coupon Bureau. And that is planning on leveraging the Hedera network. And that could be even bigger than Atma.io. And then you look at, Internet of Things and everything else that could be built on top of these networks, or traditional finance like we were talking about. All of those things combined, I expect hundreds of thousands, millions of transactions per second as we shard going forward. So that unlimited scalability is going to be pushed to the limits, I think, at every step of the way in the years to come.
Interesting. So how soon can we see that going into action?
So, I mean, it depends on where you are. As I said, right now, if you go to Metrica, which is a real easy place to go and take a look at how Hedera is processing transactions. Like I said, it's humming along at 1,000 transactions per second right now. So we can look at that right off the bat, and it's the number one network in terms of that one metric of how many transactions we're processing. And like I said, finality isn't skipping a beat. We're staying down below 5 seconds. So it's looking really good.
Nice. Now, Marshall, in regards to HBAR now being listed on DEX, what does that mean for the industry in your thoughts?
Well, it's great to have, it's great to have more decentralization and access to digital assets, right? So it's always good to have more what I would say trustworthy institutions and companies building in the space and providing retail and institutional access to digital assets. And unfortunately, over the past year, we've had kind of like a little bit of an explosion. Things were looking good, and then it turns out there were a lot of unscrupulous players, right? You saw Celsius explode, FTX explode. Now Binance is having issues, and it looks like is probably, could pull out of the United States. And Bittrex left the United States recently. And so, I think that it's good to have, it's good that there are more regulated players coming in that are looking at digital assets seriously, and not looking so much at meme coins, but looking at the networks that are really building real use case and utility, like Brandon's talking about. using examples like Atma and Avery Dennison. But this is, I think that it's a really positive thing, because there will be a big shift in the industry over the next, I would say, year to 2 years as regulations start to evolve. You have MiCA in Europe, regulations. Some would say that they're already here in the United States, but I would say that they're evolving. You have older, you have, like, for example, the 1933 Securities Exchange Act. There's been a big debate, how is that going to evolve? I think also you have, for example, the CFTC looking at now not just futures markets, but spot markets, and also the Department of Agriculture talking about digital assets. So I think as the space matures, as these networks evolve and decentralization becomes deeper and deeper, and that's another thing about cryptocurrency. Decentralization becomes stronger over time. The ability to have access to different, what I would consider strong regulated platforms, it's what is one of the things that's going to bring the space forward. And without that, I think that it makes it difficult to access HBAR, for example, to access even BTC if you don't have good platforms. And I think that with the introduction of HBAR on Proton DEX and the integration into our ecosystem, it just widens something that was already really awesome, right? You have this technology that was out there. Now it's easier to acquire. It's easier to buy and sell in a trustless environment. And then also all of the fiat ramps that we've built around that for US and EU as we expand that globally. It's just another point of access for HBAR. But I think that in general, it's good. I want to see not just what we're building at Metallicus, but I want to see in general the industry expanding. So when Hedera and Metallicus came together, I think it's really great, because there will be kind of this, in my opinion, differentiation where you will have, like I said at the very beginning of the conversation, people that are taking it seriously and the people that are not. And the people that are not are going to run into problems. And you see it lately on crypto Twitter as we kind of hit the peak of the bear market. There was this just chasing of wild things, right? Like all of a sudden NFTs started to heat up again, but it didn't feel right this time, right? It felt forced. And I think that as people start to wake up to that, they start to really look at what matters. Where are people really building? Where's their real activity? Like Brandon mentioned, there are millions of transactions that are happening every day on Hedera, and they're real world transactions. So as that grows and access to this technology grows, I think it's really great. And what we're building at Metallicus is our goal is to build the world's most friendly digital asset banking network. And so I think that when I think about what I would want in that network, HBAR is an obvious one, right? And there's other ones that are obvious too, but I think this mentality that has kind of surrounded crypto, that has kind of focused more on money, has taken away sometimes from the achievements in the space, and people are not looking at those as much, and they're happening behind the scenes. And I really predict that focus is going to shift back onto that over the next few years, because there are real world problems being solved here. And as that evolves, it's going to really change the face of business. You look at like what email did for corporations from the 90s to today, right? And now we don't even really use email. We use like Slack and other tools and things like that to have more fluid communication. Like we're on Riverside right now, streaming video. But that same thing with blockchain. It's just going to keep evolving and evolving. And Bitcoin broke the ice. The question of a non-state sponsored currency, a decentralized network that no one owns. But then you have things like Hedera that are taking it, and the token economy, the coin economy around HBAR, they're taking it even further. So I think that I just think overall it's a good thing. I like to see companies with the same vision coming together, and in general, I want to see quality assets like HBAR be more accessible.
And what's great, Marshall, is now that you've supported HBAR, there are so many other fantastic tokens that are being built in the space, and even tokens that are on other chains like USDC. But you could leverage the Hedera network to up the speed and so forth. But we have Karate Combat, we have Galaxy, we have Jam Token out there. There are so many fungible tokens that are being built on Hedera that I hope you can support here in the near future. And if you have any questions about any of those platforms, I'm more than happy to go into those as well.
I forgot to say that. That's another thing too, is that USDC is natively deployed on Hedera. There was a congressional hearing recently where they said, "Oh, you can't send stablecoin without paying a high gas fee." Well, Hedera and Proton are proof that that's just not true. And also, now that we support the Hedera network inside of the Metal ecosystem, for example, with MetalPay, other assets that live inside that ecosystem could find their way into our ecosystem. So to Brandon's point, I think that's really cool as well, because we're not just thinking about just one unit of accounting, just HBAR, but it's all the things that are in that ecosystem as well, and that's going to grow over time. And just for starters, USDC, right? One of the biggest digital assets out there.
Absolutely. And just to add on to that, we see these congressional hearings and people are debating whether DLT and crypto is even necessary. Well, University College London did a study and found that Hedera was the most efficient network on Earth. You don't have to take our word for that on that. But one of the things that was interesting, of course, they lined up all the different platforms and Hedera was sitting there at the top. But one of the things that was really interesting was Visa was included. So a centralized system. And Hedera was 3 orders of magnitude, 1,000 times more efficient than Visa. So when you have something that is that much more efficient than the traditional rails that we're using on the internet right now, that should be all the argument you should need to justify something like this, when you have that kind of efficiency gains.
Amen. Yeah, that's true. I think that, and especially the fact that it can be done in a decentralized manner, that's the future. Right, because you could always build something better in a centralized network, but they have downtime and they have issues, and there's not necessarily trust between all of these parties, like what Hedera has created with the council, that transparency between organizations didn't exist before, right?
Absolutely. And you brought up the council, which is something that's really important. We talk about the tech a lot, but Mance Harmon, one of the founders of Hedera, says that the council is probably just as important. Having governance that can effectively shepherd one of these platforms through time is really critical. Essentially, what they wanted was, they looked and said, okay, if we can meet the needs of mission critical enterprise applications, we can meet the needs of anybody. So who do we want governing this network? Well, we want these blue chip companies throughout the world. We want them decentralized across industry, across geography, across time. They have time limits, so they roll on and roll off. And initially, when they first started talking about this, people thought they were crazy. You're never going to be able to get these blue chip companies to manage a cryptocurrency platform. But here we are several years later, and we have Google and Boeing and Deutsche Telekom and Dell, and the list goes on. We have 29 of them right now, and they're doing exactly what they said they were going to do. They're managing this network the best way possible, and they really do make good business decisions for the platform.
What upcoming projects or features from Hedera that MetalPay or Proton community members can look forward to and participate in?
Yeah, so actually something that you can participate in just this weekend. Karate Combat is a sports league. MMA fans might know it. Joe Rogan has mentioned it. The commentators for Karate Combat are George St. Pierre and Bas Rutten. They are having an event this weekend. They just did their token drop, so Karate, which is, of course, built on Hedera, and their application allows you to do up-only gaming. So essentially, you pick which fighters are going to win, or you think are going to win, and if they win, you get more Karate tokens. If they lose, you don't lose anything. So nothing wrong there. They've also given up control of the league to essentially a DAO. I mean, there's some additional controls around that, but once you get more of these karate tokens, you're going to be able to decide, possibly which fighters get to fight, which rule changes there will be, things along those lines. They were early enough. They've a pretty established sports league at this time, but it was early enough and there was enough control that they could do this. They could give up control. And it's just something really interesting that I'm looking forward to. Other things that I'm looking forward to is in our gaming ecosystem. So there are some PlayStation alum that they were executives with PlayStation. These guys were responsible for The Last of Us, Uncharted, some of the biggest games that are out there. Well, they started their own company called Lethos. And Lethos is going to build a AAA game called Ashfall. And it's going to leverage Hedera for in-game assets and things along those lines. Now, they're all entertainment. They have come out with comic books around this. They're planning on doing videos and things like that. They've already done a fair amount of videos on TikTok. We also have a lot of other games that I'm excited about in the space. We have Earthlings, we have Cosmium, we have Astronova. You can certainly look all these names up, but these are all going to leverage Hedera in different ways. A big place is going to be using NFTs for in-game assets and then being able to trade those assets in between different games, things like that. But it's also being used to bring trust to the scores for competitive gaming, which is another thing that should be fun to watch going forward in the future. And that's kind of like a Trojan horse. Like right now, there's a lot of games or there's platforms and competitions that are leveraging that to add that trust. And I know sometimes gamers can be, we'll say, hesitant when it comes to Web3. Well, once you tell them, hey, you've actually been using it for the past 3 years, they may be more open to using some of these things. We also, some of the collaborations that are coming out really have me excited as well. So I just talked to the teams from Earthlings, which is a gaming metaverse that's being built on Hedera, and then Aniseed. Aniseed is creating these conservation NFTs. So they might represent real things like, a wolf in the Yellowstone or a reforested forest, or it might be a well that they're creating down or, digging and allowing people to get water down in Africa. Well, what Earthlings is going to do is incorporate those in their game. So instead of, they were already going to have sidekick animals in the game anyway. So you might as well have a real wolf that's living in the Yellowstone, and that's the NFT. And that, not only that, but Aniseed wants to be able to trade those things between games. So you can leverage those things between games. Talking about the well, you can donate to that well by in the game throwing coins into the well. And then that gets to build the next well that's in Africa or wherever it may be. But these conservation and use cases and the way they're leveraging the ecosystem is just amazing to me. And I think it has so much potential.
100%. 100%. There's a lot of exciting things going on at Hedera so far.
And I'm just scratching the surface here, Eric. So if there's any use cases or if there's anything that you're specifically interested in, just let me know and we'll go down that rabbit hole.
Let's ask it to Marshall. Is there anything specific that you would like to know?
Yeah. So what are the really interesting DeFi things that are happening in Hedera right now? Would you say, or what's interesting in kind of like trading or payments or lending, different things? Are there any interesting DeFi things that you see happening?
Yeah, well, just to start off, there was a graph that was put out, and it was actually by a Phantom influencer. So we all know the Phantom network that's out there, and they stacked up all the different DeFi platforms that were out there, and looking at the speed, which ones were fastest, and it was actually a Hedera Dex that landed at the top there. So like you guys are leveraging Hedera, leveraging HBAR, it's a good place to be in general. You just wait a few seconds to get confirmation on a trade or something along those lines. But really, it comes down to the depth of assets that are being built, because a lot of this is going to be a proof of concept for what comes later. DeFi in general is going to be a proof of concept for what comes later. So I think I talk about this a fair amount, but I think I mentioned the Digital Commodities Exchange, one of the first traditional exchanges built on a DLT. And I was talking to them, and initially, again, they were just using the Hedera consensus service, which is like an online notary or a data logging service to add trust. So I asked them, what are your future plans? What do you want to do in the future? And they said, well, we want to tokenize these commodity contracts and we want to use smart contracts to transfer them. What's that sound like? It sounds like a pure DeFi model, right? And I think what you are doing, what other DeFi platforms are doing, will serve as a primer for for the traditional financial industry and everything of value to be tokenized and then traded. And either platforms like yours will be acquired or they'll morph into places where items of of real world value can be traded. So people, talk about a lot of the stuff that's traded, a lot of meme coins and things like that. We can argue what the value of those are, but really it's serving as that proof of concept of what is possible. I mean, we've gone through some bad times recently in the past, 18 months when it comes to crypto. And has DeFi broken? Nope.
It's been incredible.
It really has.
It's been resilient. It hasn't, you look at like Maker and Compound. There was some, I forgot the terminology for it, but there was some loss where liquidations couldn't occur, right? So there were some platforms, but overall they survived. Where all the Cefi lending, like at this point, Cefi lending is not a thing. It's completely dead. I don't think there's any Cefi lender left, at least in the United States. They're all gone pretty much, either bankrupted or walked away with their tail between their legs. And I think all the DeFi has emerged. I think that's one of the things that crypto has not gotten credit for, which is, when other systems have shown the inefficiencies, when the banking world has shown cracks, the regional banks, unfortunately, when the Cefi lenders of crypto showed that humans don't make better decisions than the oracles with hard-coded rules. It really shows the power of crypto, really shows what can be done. And in general, too, just even stable coins, penetration and growth, as everything else has fallen, stablecoin market caps have pretty much only come up and gotten larger and bigger. And, the fact that you can borrow a stakeable asset off of a platform with dollars and earn interest on that stakeable asset, that in my mind is starting to become the future of diversification and digital assets and things like that, where the idea that you could show up with just dollars and earn crypto in a DeFi environment, I think that's really exciting. And what Hedera has is this incredibly efficient network that's infinitely scalable with the sharding, but also these proof of concepts that like karate and like some of the other things that Brandon mentioned that are really going to become, I think, very big, right? Because from just this kind of this conversation to say, well, this is where we're at now in 2023. I think imagine what these companies in the council, for example, are thinking about doing over the next few years. We've only scratched the surface. These are only kind of like V0.1. And I always say this all the time: 1 day in crypto equals 10 days in the real world. So 2024 is going to feel like so far away from now, and especially because of technology like this.
It's a great point, and you're talking about how fast crypto moves, and that's what people expect in this space. But enterprises still move at the same speed, even enterprises that are building in this space. I mentioned Atma.io. That was 5 years in the making. LG has incorporated Hedera into something called LG Art Lab, so you can actually get Hedera NFTs on your smart TV. That again was years in the making. Red Swan is an entity that is tokenizing real estate. I remember them talking about building on Hedera in 2018. I just talked to them the other day when they're actually going live. They've tokenized this stuff, but it's taken that long to come to fruition. It's the same thing. Even though they might have started building a few years ago, it's still going to be a couple years before these things start to come to fruition. But once the enterprises move in, it's going to be big. But that's just the beginning, because I really think some of the biggest value that's going to come out are some of these smaller builders in the space. I actually have a company that's building on Hedera myself. And I think some of the value and some of the interesting things that are being built in the startup and the medium-sized business are going to give the enterprises a run for the money, despite the fact that the enterprises are building some really impressive stuff themselves.
Awesome, everybody. Really quick. So, in the spirit of the AMA, we're going to start getting to questions from the community in a moment. So, if anybody has some questions that you really want to ask, start raising your hand. We'll start categorizing the questions, and then they'll be able to ask you both any questions that's on their mind. But before we get into that, there's tons going on, Marshall. And I'm hyped about HBAR. Seems like we're hyped about HBAR. But what does Metallicus look for when it comes to listing?
Yeah, when we're looking at digital assets that we want to include into our ecosystem, we look for real world utility. We look at decentralization. We look at who's building on it. HBAR Hedera is an example of at the top of their game, right? You look at who's building on it. You look at the decentralization of the network. You look at the scalability. You look at the quality of the things that are being built on it. And Brandon touched on some of those earlier. And the excitement around what's happening there. And that's really important to us. And then, I would say the most important thing in all of crypto is the community. So the people that come behind it, that are talking about it, that are interested in it. If there is buzz and there's buzz plus the technology and utility, that's where we get excited. More often than not, we see buzz and then we get into the technology and we go, ooh, that's all buzz, right? And crypto has that a lot. Technology has that a lot in general. You look at like a new hot spaces like AI. There is a lot of buzz around things that probably actually are not worth anything. But flash forward, give it some time to mature, and you will see those players emerge. And I think that HBAR is one of those. And in general, when we're looking at projects, we look at also the caliber of the teams, the people behind it that are building it. There is a lot of academic research and knowledge and decades of experience behind this team. And that was, one of the decisions that drove us towards it. Also, the Metallicus ecosystem, we believe in regulation technology. So, the companies and the projects building around these decentralized networks that take that seriously, that see the future of that, we frequently talk about regulation and payments and finance, but, something that Brandon touched on was like supply chain regulation, right? And tracking the carbon usage and things like that. And, as our world evolves, these are other areas of compliance and reg tech that I think are going to change everything. I think flashback 10 years ago, there was kind of this mentality. I remember I was organizing this thing we called the Bitcoin Fair in San Francisco. And it was just a meetup of all the Bitcoin crypto businesses and also merchants that wanted to accept Bitcoin. This was 2013, early 2014. So it was very early. It was exactly about 10 years ago. And I remember somebody walked by in the malls. We put it together, this place called the Ramen Underground in the Japantown Mall, which is a tiny little location and but very, very cozy. And it was funny. Somebody walked by and she said, "Bitcoin, isn't that for money laundering?" And it's like, well, that's because you just saw on the news this thing about the Silk Road, or you saw some very bad, kind of sensationalist thing. And the media tends to run with these stories. And yes, you have FTX, you have Mt. Gox. In the beginning of a new era of decentralization and economies, you're going to have these explosions. And I'd say every 3 years, it almost follows Bitcoin halving, but it's like every 3 years we have these cycles and you have kind of like these explosions. But then there are networks and there are companies and there are individuals and visionaries that really see the future of this. And the good news, the exciting news, the idea that people wouldn't, the end of usurious payday lenders, the end of massive supply chain theft, the the basically globalization of free and fast payments. These are the kind of the winning success stories that as they come about, people are going to go, oh my God, I focused on this one little tiny exchange over here blowing up. And yeah, maybe it was a big exchange. Maybe it was a multi-billion-dollar exchange, right? So it's not so small anymore. I remember when Mt. Gox was, oh my God, 600 million. Well, what about 10 billion? Right. And that's where we're at. And you can't say, oh, well, with inflation, that's what it was 10 years ago, because it wasn't. We've had some bad inflation, but not that bad. So crypto clearly is growing. The big success stories are coming. And so Metallicus looks for where the visionaries and leaders and digital assets and blockchain networks that are going to be part of that success story. And then we want people to have access to those networks. We want you to be able to access HBAR coin just as easy as you can access USD in your bank account. That's the vision. And so that's where I think it's really exciting. And as we move forward, we're looking at projects like Hedera, and we're also looking at how do all these things come together. Because again, like I said, one of the hallmarks I think of the geniuses in crypto are those that understand that, those that are building for the multi-chain world. I'll never forget. I helped organize a Dogecoin event many years ago. Again, 10 years ago, Dogecoin in San Francisco. And we got Andreas Antonopoulos to do the keynote, which was just awesome. And I'll never forget, he said, everybody, if you think there's going to be more than just Bitcoin is going to be a successful currency, or it'll only be Bitcoin's only successful currency in the future, raise your hand. And I think like maybe 10 people raised their hand, hardcore maxis. They said, how about 2 to 3 cryptos? More people raised their hand. How about 100 cryptos? More people raised their hand. He said, what if you think there could be potentially, over 1,000 cryptocurrencies, maybe a few hundred that are really relevant? And the whole room raised their hands. And this is the guy who wrote Mastering Bitcoin, who previously everybody thought was, maybe he only likes Bitcoin. But the hallmark of that intelligence in the crypto space, I think, is that vision that there won't only be one. And then those that are working to solve those problems, whether it's layer 2, layer 3, layer 0, and connecting these chains, that's going to be, that's something that we're really looking at. And we look at those visionaries that see that way and align with them. And so far it's proven to be true, because that vision over time has become more and more and more true. And just to touch back on what Brandon said about Visa, you have some of the largest banking, payments institutions, technology companies in the world looking at blockchain. They will all have their own blockchain in the future. They will all have their own smart contracts and interactions with networks like Hedera, like Metal Blockchain, like Bitcoin. And where it's going to be valuable is where it brings value to the consumer and the enterprise. And it's almost like you don't have to even know that it's integrated. Whether you're the IT guy at the big company or you're just a consumer using it, it's going to be something that's going to create a better experience and solve a lot of problems. And we've barely scratched the surface of those problems. So I think also I also really like teams that have a strong presence in the US in particular. I mean, maybe I'm biased because I'm from the US, but I like teams that are fighting for freedom here. And I don't say that word lightly, freedom here in the United States for decentralized networks and digital assets, because it is a new asset class and it is a new form of money. And I think that a few, flashback some years ago, this was not really a topic in Congress. And now it is. Now we're seeing them meet every week, every couple of weeks to talk about it and its implications for how it will move our country forward, but also where we need to protect ourselves. And I think that, the companies and the teams and the visionaries building around that have that vision, I want to support them.
Thank you for that, Marshall. So now let's get to the community part of our AMA. We got a couple questions from the audience. I am going to start off with Super Synapse. Super Synapse, how you doing today?
Hey guys, good to be here. I have a few questions. I don't want to overstay my welcome, but my main question is for HBAR. I wanted to ask, what competitive advantages, what partnership opportunities do you want to specifically leverage from Metal and Metallicus? Is this more than just a DEX listing, or is there actually some concrete, plans in the works to be able to, use some of the tech that Metallicus has put together?
Well, that question probably Marshall could answer a little bit better than I could. But the main thing is we want to expand our ecosystem as rapidly as possible. It's hard to know really where the most value is going to come sometimes. So we want to spread the net far and wide and try to get as much participation as possible. This team is without a doubt skilled. I mean, this is exactly what we're looking for because we know that they can bring value to what we're trying to build, and then hopefully they can leverage off of what we're building as well. Hopefully I've piqued the interest of Marshall with Karate and some of the other HTS tokens that are built in the space. So, we can help each other. Let's try to grow this pie together. There's no point. And when it comes to like arguing which layer one is the best and all that kind of stuff, let's not fight about what percentage of the pie we're going after. Let's focus on growing the pie.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Cool. Yeah, I was just curious if there was more, anything more concrete in the works, because I think it's exciting whenever two blockchains get together. Yeah, that was the main question on that.
The main thing I'll say is our BD team would probably have a better idea of exactly what they're going after with this partnership in particular. But I'd have to defer to them or Marshall on that.
Yeah, I could comment on it a little bit, but I'll always say that, if there is something exciting, I'll always tell you soon, or I can't really say too much because I don't want it to not be a surprise. But also, what I will say is that Hedera and Metallicus are looking at each other like, there's a lot of potential for us to work together. We're aligned in vision. A lot of our executives, definitely see eye to eye. And so as we build out our network, we're looking at how can we leverage Hedera. And I can't speak for the Hedera team, but obviously they see something over here with us, on the banking side and payment side, where we can bring, fiat ramps and different integrations. So Metallicus is, a multi-chain, vision for crypto. And we love Hedera. It's funny because I many years ago, I was lived in Boston, Massachusetts, went to Northeastern University and dropped out like any good entrepreneur. But we reconnected with Northeastern University and their crypto club. And one of the people who ran that, Allison, joined the team at Hedera. So and we've stayed together in touch. And so it's just a small world, right? Where, good people tend to align through these connections, even if they're as random as, something that's not how we weren't connected today. There's all this crossover. And we look at that and, when we see good things being built and we see good teams, we want to align with them. And Hedera is definitely one of those. So I won't spoil anything and I can't really say too much. And, there is no, big thing that I am hinting at or anything like that. But what I will say is over time, like attracts like, good attracts good. We see each other, and I wouldn't be surprised if you saw more collaborations and integrations. And, Metallicus also wants to, not only we're building the fiat ramping side on consumer, and soon we're going to be adding corporate accounts and enterprise, but also, we want to build out the wallet technology and the signing technology. So that's something that we're looking at as well. I can tell you from the Metallicus side, wallet support with WebAuth, our new wallet. And that's, it started with Proton, but that's going to be a multi-chain wallet. And also, around that, I think Ledger has done a great job as a company, and the hardware wallets have done a great job, but there's clearly a need for an evolution. What we saw yesterday with kind of the frustration with that product update, there's clearly a need to upgrade the wallet space. And I'll just say that, just very matter of fact. And the digital identity around that is going to bring a lot of questions about how we do that and handle the privacy. And so, as we build that out, we look at Hedera to integrate Hedera as well, the Hedera network, because there's a lot that can be leveraged there. And also we want to harness, the assets that are in and around the ecosystem as well, right? The USDC and Brandon mentioned Karate, and there's other tokens and assets that are being built, we want to leverage that as well. So you can definitely expect more coming from the Metallicus side.
If I could, can I ask one question to you, Marshall, concerning Metallicus?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, and I'll leave room for other people after this. As far as banking goes, and I know that's like something that I hear a lot of, especially with Metal and Proton. Are there any banks that are currently using Metal that you have as like entities on the network? Did you have anything that you can talk about with any of that? And possibly how that could help HBAR and be a good on-ramp for other chains?
Yeah, so I can kind of half answer your question. When it comes to these announcements and banks and other financial institutions, we really we have a process for PR and how we come out about it. There's so much excitement in the crypto space. It really is important how that messaging comes out, so it doesn't come out the wrong way. To answer your question about banks building in the Metal ecosystem, yes, we do have banks building in the Metal ecosystem. I won't leak any of the press announcements or names or anything like that because those are coordinated things that we have to do. So we're always looking to make sure we really get that language right, make sure it's a strong joint announcement, and also it's really important that language and that PR is precise like a scalpel. So the last thing I want to do is kind of like fumble it in a Twitter Spaces, but you can sense from the tone of my voice and my answer of saying yes, I'm excited, and there, the short, yes and no answer, yes. And so keep an eye out for that in the future, and it's going to be very, very exciting. But unfortunately, I can't divulge anything in here. All I can tell you is soon, basically soon.
All right, thank you both of y'all. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Super Synapse, for the questions. And we're going to get one last question in here. Coca, Proton Samurai, thank you for waiting. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi guys. Great to hear the interesting news that HBAR and Metallicus are teaming up. I was just wondering, between Marshall and Mr. HBAR, I forgot your name, sorry. Who do you guys want to work with? What would be your dream combination of who else? What other blockchains would you like to work with?
Oh, that's a good.
Go ahead, Brandon.
Sure. Yeah. Blockchains, I think, as Marshall has said a couple times, it's going to be a multi-chain world. There's no question about that. There's different ecosystems that have different strengths. So, for example, Ethereum or Karate token was minted on both Hedera and it was minted on Ethereum. It was minted on Ethereum to tap into their ecosystem as far as liquidity and things like that. So some of the VCs that wanted to get involved with that, they wanted to tap into the liquidity of the ETH ecosystem. So they opted to take those. Now the app, because of the fees, the really low fees, can only use the HBAR or can only use the Hedera version, the HTS version of the token. So, synergies like that just make sense. One of the things XRP, the XRP army is like kindred spirits with the Hedera family. For whatever reason, we've just kind of come together, or at least the communities have, and we work together a lot. So there's a lot of things there, but it's not just about that. There's also the enterprises out there, and we see I remember early on, before there were any governing council members for Hedera, people would throw out their dream council members, like who would be best to build on Hedera. And I remember, all kinds of names coming up. And then there'd be community members like, hey guys, we're not going to get names like that. And then here we are 6 years later, or 5 years later, and we do have those kind of names: Google and Dell and IBM and everybody else that's on our council. So I play that game over and over in my head. I would love to see Apple and Disney and Tesla or SpaceX or those kind of entities, because not just because it would be great to get that kind of expertise on the council, but what the heck could they do with this technology? How could they leverage it going forward? So that's one of the things that I'm really excited about. And then, of course, once they're in the ecosystem, they can be leveraged by all the other chains as well.
Yeah, I would follow it up with I agree with a lot of things that Brandon said. I'm a huge Apple fanboy. I'd love to work closer with Apple. I'd love to work with Microsoft and OpenAI and some of these really cool emerging tech companies. But our focus primarily Metallicus is the payments and banking side. So JP Morgan, Bank of America, the too big to fail banks coming on board and working together with us. And I can tell you that I'm really just so I guess our team is so blessed and so excited about what we're doing, because we are having those conversations. And just like Brandon said, you look back, we rewind to 2020 or 2017, follow those 3-year cycles. These are things that we dreamt of in 2017. We'd love to have a conversation with JP Morgan, and then we're having one. We'd love to work with regional banks and talk about stable coins and create interbanking networks with blockchain, and then we're having those conversations, and then we're getting into those partnerships, and it's incredible. I think that and me myself as a veteran, having been in the space for like 14 years going on now, it's crazy, because I got excited in 2009, 2010, thinking about where this could go. Oh man, if Bitcoin could go to $1, it could go to $20, it could go to $1,000. When it hit 1,000, I thought, okay, then surely it could go to 1,000,000. But that's just one little thing that I think is on that catches the public's eye, the attention's eye, is the price and the excitement around markets. But in my mind, the real excitement is everyone in the world having a crypto wallet, everyone in the world using this technology. So for me, it's really it's the banks, name the largest banks in the world. That's who I want to partner with. And on blockchains, again, I feel like we're really blessed, because I couldn't name a blockchain and team and foundation that I'm not having the conversation with, that I greatly admire the visionaries, the people behind it, and we're already having all those conversations. So I think it's just a matter of time to develop those conversations and become more mature, like we are having like we're here today. And Hedera and Metallicus are just at the very beginning, just kind of on our first date, with Metal Pay and with what we're building. It's only the very beginning. So just stick around and wait a few years and watch how this ecosystem matures. It won't be only one coin, and it won't be only one team. It's going to be the best and brightest minds, and those that are the best executing, that are going to really rise to the top. And Hedera is definitely one of those.
And Marshall, just to cap this off, I do have to jump off here in a couple minutes. Got my startup. We have a developers meeting. We're coming to market here soon, so that's going to be busy. But we have Shinhan Bank. We have Nomura, so that's the Goldman Sachs in Japan. We have Standard Bank in Africa. So again, we have some of those connections. Maybe we could work together with some of that stuff.
Let's collaborate. Let's do it. That's what crypto is all about: collaboration.
Thank you so much for the question, Coca. And I want to give another big thank you to both Brandon from the HBAR Foundation and Marshall Hayner for hopping on this AMA. Brandon, where can we find the HBAR Foundation, or you?
Well, you can check me out on social media, the HBAR Bull. You can check out, we cover the entire space every Friday. So there's going to be some news coming out about Hedera tomorrow on that. But as far as the HBAR Foundation, again, we are a grant giving organization, but we give all kinds of support to people building in the Hedera ecosystem. You can go to the hbarfoundation.org and go to apply if you're somebody that's building in the space. But yeah, go ahead and check out all that stuff. I do want to say that I do a lot of this kind of community engagement on a regular basis, Twitter Spaces and all that fun stuff. And this is the most fun I've had in a long time on a space. So I appreciate you guys having me on. I'll tell you one thing: when you said we're going to be streaming on Riverside and we're going to have the Twitter Space, I was a little bit nervous. I was like, that's a lot of moving parts there, but it turned out really well. So I appreciate you guys taking the time.
Thank you so much, Brandon.
Thank you, Brandon. Cheers. And shout out to everyone in the Hedera community, HBAR. Thanks for coming out today. It's been a blast.